Hello, Algebra 2 students. Mrs. Myers here. We are looking at our second day of doing phase shifts, which is basically our second day of lesson 11, day 2. So what we're going to do today with phase shifts is pretty much repeat what we did last week, but also do some vertical translations. So you did numbers 1 and 2 of the problem set already. Now you have to additionally do numbers 3 and 4. I know some of you didn't quite pay attention to that in the directions and did all 4 of them. I would just urge you to please, take these notes, see, if you really did do a good job with those problems, and if not, go back and fix and finish them if needed. And for those of you who haven't done them yet, well then obviously, go through this video, take notes, see a couple more practice problems done with all these transformations all put together, and then give those 2 problems a try, okay? So we're going to do a problem with sine and problem with cosine, just so we can, revisit these and feel good about it, okay? So our first equation is y equals -1 plus 4 sine of 4x minus pi inside parentheses, okay? So the first thing we want to do is we want to state all the transformations that we are going to be doing, okay? So we know we're going to be doing them to the sine function. So I'm just going to do a quick little sketch right up here of what the parent graph looks like. So we go midline to max, to midline, to min, back to midline. Okay, so this is what our sine cycle looks like for our parent graph, and now we're going to apply transformations to them. So we always do dilations first. Okay, so right here, okay, with this 4, this multiplication by 4, we're looking at a dilation of 4 to the y's. So that is going to change our amplitude. Okay, this multiplication of 4 right here to the x, okay, that is going to be a dilation of 1/4 to the x's. So that is going to change our period, which would be a standard 2 pi, but instead multiplied by 1/4 now means it's a period of pi over 2, and that is going to give us a scaling that is pi over 2 divided by 4, which basically means pi over 2 times 1/4, which is pi over 8, okay? Then we are going to apply a reflection if we see any, but we do not have any negation, so there's no reflection, all right? Then we go on to the translations. So we do have a vertical and a horizontal translation. So let's say the vertical for the end. Let's do the horizontal translation first, the phase shift, since this is like the main gist of the lesson. So just do more practice with this. Now, because there's a subtraction here, I do know I'm going to go to the right. I'm going to have a positive phase shift, but again, be careful from last week. This is not your phase shift, okay? You have to have this in factored form in order to state what your phase shift is. So you factor out that 4, okay, see that multiplier, that 4, you factor out that 4, and then what you're left with after you factor out the 4, that is your phase shift. So we're going to go pi over 4 radians to the right, okay, that's our phase shift. Now, one more transformation to do, and that is our translation, okay, for vertical. So you see this -1 that's being added here? Well, I can always take that, okay, see it says there's a plus sign between it, and I'm just going to erase it so you can see what's going on here. And I don't really need to have that plus sign in front of it, and I can put that -1 like that at the end. Okay, that tells me that I am going to take this graph and I'm going to go down 1, okay? So those are all my transformations that I am doing. So I have always urged you, okay, to do the transformations of dilations first with your initial graph. So that's what we're going to do here. Okay, and I know that I'm going to have a dilation of 4 to the y's, so I'm going to make sure that I go up at least 4 boxes, 1, 2, 3, 4 to the y, and down 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that I can show my amplitude, and then I am going to do every box 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes to the right just to show what one cycle looks like on my x-axis, okay? Now with that in mind, okay, my sine cycle starts at a midline, okay? If there was a reflection, by the way, if you feel comfortable with it, you could do the reflection at the same time, and instead of going midline to max, you could go midline to min. You could just make this graph go upside down if you saw that there was a reflection, but there's not. So I'm going to go up to my max. Oh, pardon that noise, that was just my dog. Then back down to the midline, all the way down to the minimum, and back up to the midline, okay? So this is what one sine cycle looks like, okay, with the dilations. Now notice I have to put a scaling on my x-axis, not just enough to have the scaling on the y-axis, that's for the amplitude, but look at the work that you did here with the horizontal dilation, okay? I compressed that cycle down so that it did not finish at a standard 2 pi radians. I'm seeing that it finishes at a standard pi over 2 radians. And the scaling, right, when you take that cycle and divide it by 4, okay, that scaling is pi over 8. So now I know, starting at 0, it's 1 pi over 8. Okay, this is 2 pi over 8, which reduces to pi over 4. This is 3 pi over 8, and then this would be 4 pi over 8, which reduces to pi over 2, right? So there is my one cycle with respect to the dilations. Now, to continue on, I've got to do my horizontal translation, okay, to the right pi over 4, but I also have to go down 1. Now, with that in mind, okay, you can do these separately, or who knows, maybe you're feeling really good about it, you can do them at the same time, but the graph is going to start to get a bit crowded. So what I'm going to suggest that we do is after let's just do the horizontal dilations together on the same set of axes, is I'm going to actually redo a graph so that I can make it look nice and neat and clean in the end, okay? So here's my x-axis. So if I got to go to the right pi over 4 with my critical points, so that's 2 boxes worth here, right? So 2 critical points. So this midline actually moves right onto that midline, so that's easy, okay? The maximum is going to move right over to here, okay? Then this midline is going to go back to this other midline, okay? This minimum is going to come here, and this midline is going to go there, okay? So you can see how this shifts over, right? So I don't want to look at this graph anymore, okay? You can erase it, kind of scribble it out, okay? This is now what I am looking at here, okay? And I have that cycle finishing at, so it's pi over 4, so it's 1 pi over 8, 2 pi over 8, 3 pi over 8, 4 pi over 8. So this would be 5 pi over 8, and this would be 6 pi over 8, and 6 pi over 8 is 3 pi over 4, okay? So I have this cycle now finishing at 3 pi over 4 radians when it started at 1 pi over 4 radians, okay? So that's still a period of pi over 2, so that's good. I just phase shifted it over. Now I still have to go down 1. So again, you can start to see how crowded this is looking. So I'm going to suggest that we put a brand new set of axes. Now the other thing that I'm going to ask us to do is I'm not just going to say sketch 1 cycle or 2 cycles. I'm actually going to give us an interval. I'm going to say I want us to sketch from negative pi to positive pi, okay? So we did a little bit of that practicing before, okay, where it's not just a matter of exactly 1 cycle or exactly 2 cycles, okay? It's going to be to do within an interval. Now what I know, if I have my scaling at pi over 8, okay, is to the right, I'm going to need 8 boxes to get to pi. Because why? Because 8 pi over 8 would be pi, right? And of course 8 boxes to the left. So I'm going to just make sure, and I'm going to get my axes all set up over here, okay, that I am going to make sure I have at least 8 boxes, okay, to go to the left and to the right. And on top of it, I'm going to make sure that with my y-axis, okay, that I can go down 1 box and get to negative 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And then my midline is going to be at negative 1, and my max is only going to be at 3. So I want to make sure I have that scaling on my y-axis. So before I had 4, 0, negative 4 for my max, my midline, and my min. Because I'm going to go down 1, now I'm going to have 3, negative 1, 5. So this again is going to be my midline in here. Okay, so draw it in as a dotted line, okay? And I'm going to now see this cycle right here. I'm going to make it nice and dark, okay? This is where I've already phase shifted, okay? But now what I want to do is I want to also go down 1. So let's put that scaling, okay? So pi over 8, so 1 pi over 8, okay, 2 pi over 8, which is pi over 4, 3 pi over 8, 4 pi over 8, which is pi over 2, 5 pi over 8, 6 pi over 8, which is 3 pi over 4, 7 pi over 8, and then 8 pi over 8, which is pi, right? So look, I had this point that was pi over 4, 0, right? I mean, if I was to transfer it right over, it'd be right there. But now what I want to do is I want to go down 1. Let's make that nice and clear, okay? And then this point right here, which is at 3 pi over 8, 4, okay, so 3 pi over 8, 4, that would be right there. Now I'm going to go down 1, okay? So I can actually start to see them, so I can connect it, right? I'm just going down 1. And then this point, which is at pi over 2, 0, that's just going to go down 1. Right, you see that? You can start to see this taking shape now, okay? This point right here, which is at 5 pi over 8, negative 4. Okay, I'm just going to go down to here. Okay, and then this point, which is at 3 pi over 4, 0, that's just going to be right there. So now ta-da, I've just taken this cycle and I've gone down 1. But I'm not done, because again, I am going to not just sketch 1 cycle or 2 cycles specifically, I'm going to sketch within this interval. So I don't have this graph all the way to pi radians yet. See, I know how many more boxes I need to go to get to pi radians, so I just look at this, I just look at the cycle, right? I went midline to max, to midline, to min, to midline. And every single box, okay, every pi over 8 radians took me to a next critical point. So what's next here, 7 pi over 8, is to go back up to a max, so where I was before, right? And then to go back down to the midline, which is just where the midline is at pi radians, and there you go, now I've gone to pi. But I gotta go all the way to negative pi radians, right? So you see there's 8 boxes to go to positive pi, right? See that scaling? So I'm just gonna go here and go negative 1 pi over 8, negative 2 pi over 8, reduce it, negative 3 pi over 8, negative 4 pi over 8, reduce it, negative 5 pi over 8, negative 6 pi over 8, reduce it, negative 7 pi over 8, and then negative 8 pi over 8. Okay, so now if you see how this is going, right, I'm just going to come here and I'm going to be midline, minimum, back to the midline. Okay, then I'm going to keep going here, which is max, back to the midline. Okay, then I'm going to keep going, this is minimum, back to the midline. Okay, notice I'm giving myself the points to actually connect, right? We've talked about that already. Okay, so you just keep plotting your points and just keep connecting your points. And then finally, I'm almost done here. There we go. That's it, okay? So this is now your final graph. Make sure you put your labels of X and Y on your axes, right? So this was just my rough draft. Okay, that was just to kind of get me going. And because I had lots and lots of different transformations to do, I made myself a nice final sketch over here, okay? All right, so let's try another one. Sorry about this, my son is mowing the lawn here, and I didn't think he was gonna come right outside the window where I was, but of course he is. So hopefully he will be going away soon, and we won't have to listen to him. Sorry about that. All right, let's try one more. Okay, we are now going to look at y equaling 2 minus 3 cosine of 3x plus pi over 2. All right, so I am going to just remind myself what the cosine cycle looks like here. All right, so it goes max, midline, min, midline, max. Okay. Oh, here he comes back again, sorry. And then I'm going to state all my transformations, okay? So I've got this multiplication by 3 here, and dilation of 3 of the y's. Get that multiplication of 3 there. This dilation of 1/3 to the x's. That minus is really a negation, because see this 2 here, what I'm going to do is a positive 2, so I'm going to put that in back there like that. So this is really a negation, that's a reflection over the x-axis. Then I've got 2 translations to do, okay? I've got my horizontal translation, which is right here. All right, inside, I know I'm going to go to the left, but this is not how many radians I'm phase shifting. I got to factor out that 3. This is going to be my phase shift. So I'm going to go left pi over 6, okay? And last but not least, this is going to tell me to go up 2. All right, so I've got all those transformations. All right, so I'm going to do my initial sketch here. All right, I know I've got to go up 3 and down 3 for my amplitude. Okay, that's right here. Amp is 3, okay? This is going to change my period. Okay, so instead of being 2 pi radians, it's going to be 2 pi times 1/3 or 2 pi over 3 radians, okay? So what is that going to do about the scale, right? So 2 pi over 3 divided by 4, which means multiply by 1/4, okay? Reduce out, that's a scale of pi over 6, okay? So 4 boxes to make a cycle, okay? In which I know I'm going to end at 2 pi over 3 radians, okay? And here I've got the scale of pi over 6. So I just put a little, just put that scaling down in there. Hopefully, you know, we've had lots of days of this, so you guys feeling a little bit better about taking that scale and going 1 pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6, 4 pi over 6. Obviously reducing down, we see that that ends at 2 pi over 3, just like it should, okay? So I'm actually gonna see, can we, okay, do you think you'd okay to put all of that together in our first sketch, okay? So, because we have the reflection over the x-axis, the maxes and the mins will interchange. So instead of having a max to start off, we're going to have a minimum. And because I have this vertical dilation, this amplitude change is going to be down at -3. Then we're going to go up to the midline. Then we're going to have a max up at +3, then midline, then a minimum down at -3. So this is what one cycle is going to look like, okay, with all of that done together at one shot. Now, this phase shift is -pi over 6. We're going to go to the left. So you see that's only one box, right? So let me put -pi over 6 here, and go ahead, just move every point left pi over 6. Connect those dots. Okay, and now we don't want to look at this anymore, right? Okay, but the thing is, we're not done. We still have to do a vertical shift up 2. Now this is starting to get crowded again, right? Okay, so I'm going to do what I did last time, right? See, I don't want to, right now I've got so much going on. I would have to erase this, then I would have to do something in, erase more. So I'm just going to start with a brand new sketch, okay, a brand new set of axes. And we're going to do the same thing that we did before, we're just going to do it within an interval, okay? So this time though, okay, I'm going to ask us to sketch, well, actually, how about we do it within the interval of pi over 2 to -pi over 2. Okay, so I'm going to get myself, okay, a new set of axes. Okay, I'm going to put my y-axis right in the middle, okay, since I know I got to go left and right the same amount. Okay. And I also know that I have to go up 2. So before I had 3, 0, -3 on my y-axis, now I know I have to go 1, 2 for the midline. Okay. Then I have to go up to 5, but then I'm only going to go down to -1. Okay. So the whole graph is going to be moved up 2. So I have that midline right there at y equals 2. All right. Now let's look at these points. So I had -pi over 6, -3. Okay, so let's actually put that -pi over 6 right there. But I know that instead of that being down at -3, that's going to be right there. It's actually a little hard to see with what I just put together. But anyways, that's where that point now is. It went up. And then this point, which is at 0, 0, that's going to go up to 0, 2. Okay. Then I add this point right here. Okay, which is at pi over 6, 3. Now that's going to be up here at pi over 6, 5. Okay, so you can start to see this take its shape, right? Okay, then I'm going to come back to this midline right here, which is at pi over 3, 0, but now, oops, that's going to be at pi over 3, 2, right? And then lastly, that minimum, which is at pi over 2, -3, okay, now that's at pi over 2, -1. All right, so you can see that cycle, which is right there, has just gone up 2. All right, but I need to sketch from -pi over 2 to +pi over 2. Well, that's great right here because there's +pi over 2. Okay, perfect. I don't have to go any further to the right at all. I'm done. But I do have to go to -pi over 2. So look, if this is -pi over 6, right, then just mimic this. This is -pi over 3, right, and then this is -pi over 2. So what's going to come after this minimum is I'm going to come back up to this midline, and then I'm going to come back up to this maximum, and that is going to be what I have. So it's 1.5 cycles. So sometimes when you're given an interval, it's going to be lots and lots of cycles that you have. Okay, you keep going, keep going, keep going. And then sometimes it's just going to be a little bit more of a cycle. And who knows, maybe if I gave you the interval that only said pi over 3 to the right, then you would have to erase some of what I've already given you. So you don't, sometimes it's going to be perfectly where you need it to be. Sometimes you're going to have to extend it more. Sometimes you're going to have to cut it back and maybe not go so far. It all depends on what the interval is with respect to the equation and all the different transformations. All right, so hope you feel okay about this, and I apologize for the noise of the lawnmower coming in and out there for a bit. Of course, now he's far enough away and it's not really as intrusive, but anyway, so hope you're doing okay with this. Let me know if you have any questions. Be well. Bye.